Salutations, respected viewers. So the motion before the Debating Society today is that this House believes that presidents should serve for life. So I shall obviously start off as the proposition, as is customary. All right, so, Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, presidents should serve for life for several reasons. Primarily because then they can implement long-term policies. Secondly, because it makes an excellent replacement for a monarchy. And lastly, because it provides the stability that we need in order to really achieve success, tranquility, and national unity. So get back to the first one. The trouble at the moment is we have short-termism, not long-termism. And politicians are often looking to the election cycle, saying, will I be re-elected next time in a few years' time? And they're not willing to implement policies that will be unpopular in the short term, but will pay dividends in the long run. So we must enable politicians to enact policies that will come to fruition decades later, and people will be thankful in the long term. And that's why politicians often shy away from doing things which are needful, but will be unpopular in the immediate term. And that's why we often have, say, deficit financing, tax cuts, lots of borrowing, which means that national debt balloons out of control and it precipitates a crisis, things like that. So politicians shouldn't be too swayed by elections. We should elect people and then empower them to do what is necessary. Moreover, we'd take elections a lot more seriously if we knew we'd elect this person and that's it, he or she will be head of state for the rest of his or her life. You see that their election turnout is tumbling in many countries. Moreover, this would save a great deal of money and indeed time on elections. People are often bored silly by elections coming up every few years, so the media could report other things. So we know that presidents, well, we've had them in some form, various countries since the 18th century, and they are an ersatz monarch. So a quasi-monarch should therefore serve for life. It would unite the country. We know that he or she is there, and we're not always dragging this person down into the mire. They should be above the hurly-burly of daily partisan politics. I'm not applying this to legislatures. Legislatures should face fairly frequent elections. And this is another thing, because then it separates the different branches of government, the executive branch from the legislative branch. Alexander Hamilton, one of the founding fathers of the United States, he proposed that presidents and senators be elected and serve for the whole of their lives. Now, unfortunately, that did not come to be. However, we would have the proviso that a president is, of course, entitled to retire, and if he or she absolve me, if he or she is incapacitated for health reasons, then he or she could be removed from office. There'd be a medical panel of, say, 10 experts, and if a majority of them voted that this person is incapable of discharging his or her duties, then that person would have to be removed from office. We could have worked out a chain of command of who's going to take over if the president had to be removed from office, someone who'd be the president pro tempore, until such time as one was able to elect a replacement. So for those reasons, I propose that presidents serve for life. Well, now I'm the opposition. So, Madam President, ladies and gentlemen of the House, we must not have presidents who serve for life for a number of reasons. We need to have a check on the power of the executive. We do not want a monarchy, and because this medical panel that's so outlined would fail to do its duty. But I want to go over those in greater depth and flesh them out. So presidents should be subject to re-election every few years because we should have a progress check on their job performance. It's ridiculous to put someone to a job. Nobody gets a job for life. Those days are long gone. That would be daft. Even if this person was grossly underperforming, was utterly deceitful, he or she could not be booted out. So sovereignty resides in the common people, not in the head of state. So it's power starts at the bottom and flows upwards, not the other way around. So a good person could turn bad. Policies could be failures. They could be cataclysmic. Therefore, we must have the right to kick somebody out if he or she is failing. It would create a preposterous cult of the personality. And there's a childishness to sycophancy. You see this in any countries which have presidents for life. Even though they don't actually say they're for life, if they are effectively there for life, that's what always happens. And we don't want one-man rule. This would lead to dictatorship, and he or she would then be able to get all his or her cronies in the Supreme Court, lackeys in the legislature. So it would necessarily lead to a totalitarian state, and that would be terrible. Another problem with this is then succession is always such a headache. We don't want someone staying there too long, running out of steam, running out of fresh ideas. So we should limit it. We're not saying necessarily term limits, but the president should be subject to re-election every few years. 7 years is the longest presidential term I've heard of. Republic of Ireland, that's what we have. France used to have that, slimmed it down to 5 years. Now, if you want a monarchy, fine. Propose a monarchy. Don't propose a quasi-monarchy. Come on, go the whole hog. Have the courage of your convictions if that's what you actually want. Now, I can't think of any country in recent years that has elected a president for life. It has happened in countries, and they tend to be very undeveloped countries, countries with a very primitive political system. Now, we want pluralism. We want people to be offered a real choice, and people to be able to dismiss their president if he or she is doing a terrible job. Now, coming on to this medical panel, which was proposed by the speaker opposite, well, patently he recognises that presidents sometimes have to be removed from office, and we should do that through the electoral process. The medical panel might fail to do its duty. It might fail to take somebody out of the presidency when he or she needs to be defenestrated. Or indeed it could be manipulated. They could remove the president for spurious medical reasons, even if he or she was completely compos mentis and capable of executing his or her presidential duties. You didn't even propose a retirement age. People live to the age of 122. Do we really want someone who's gaga being president? Surely not. So this is a dreadful and silly proposal, and there's a reason why nobody ever makes it. It would necessarily lead to a disastrous situation. So because we need to be able to recall our leaders, we need to reject this motion. Because we don't want a false monarchy, that's another reason why we must reject it. And because this medical panel ideal is simply unworkable, I urge the House to vote no to this motion.